I'll have you do that too.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Tom Foster with Fast Company and Inc. magazines. Welcome. And welcome to a really beautiful Austin day. We're here to talk about, the name of this panel is The Myth of the Superhero Entrepreneur. And I expect if you're here, you're probably an entrepreneur yourself, and you might know exactly what we're talking about, but let me spell it out for just a second. We're sort of zeroing in on a moment that in any new venture, there's, in the early stages, a moment when the entrepreneur sort of has to do everything. Everything from, you started as sort of the creative visionary, and you also are doing finance, and you were doing HR, and you were doing mopping the floors. And then as the company starts to scale, there comes this moment where you have to let go of some of those things. And that, on one hand, can be very liberating, and on another hand, can be really difficult and can be sort of a trying time to let go of some of those things when you sort of feel like you have control of everything. And so in talking to this panel of entrepreneurs we have up here, it turns out that moment is something that that a lot of people really struggle with. And we're going to sort of dig into that moment and sort of the best strategies for getting through it. Hear the stories of how these guys did it. So on our panel here, we have Tiffany Taylor Chen to my left. Tiffany is the founder of Tiff's Treats, an Austin company that is growing like crazy. If you're not familiar with Tiff's Treats, warm cookies delivered to your door, and you should be familiar with them. Jason Ballard is to her left. Jason Ballard is the co-founder of TreeHouse. TreeHouse! Another Austin company, really fascinating company, is sort of the sustainable alternative to, say, Home Depot. It's kind of like the Whole Foods of home improvement. And there are several locations throughout Texas, started here in Austin, still based in Austin. And to Jason's left, we have Candy Barone. Candy is, the founder of You Empowered Strong. Candy is an executive trainer and coach and a longtime Fortune 100 executive herself. Who I think in your experience talking to a lot of founders will have a really interesting perspective on what these guys have gone through and how it relates to what others go through. So cool. So let's just jump in. Let's start with, I want to just sort of share your stories so the audience has a sense of what you've been through. So why don't we start with you, Tiffany? How did you take us sort of from the founding of the company up to this moment when you sort of first started wrestling with what we're talking about here?
Sure, yeah. So we started back in 1999 when we were sophomores at UT. So me and my husband, Leon, who's over there right now, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and I stood him up on a date, and so I baked him some cookies as an apology. When I got to his house, the cookies were still warm, and when I got back to my house, he called me and said, "We're going to do this as a business. It's going to be exactly like pizza delivery, but we're going to do it with cookies."
Had the date happened, or was this?
No, I stood him up on the date. The date
And so
didn't
you
exist.
decided to co-found a company.
Yeah. Well, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, so
Okay.
that makes it a little better.
Yeah.
So he convinced me into doing this. Originally, my idea was no, I didn't want to do that. I was in college. But he thought it was going to be lots of fun. We're going to make tons of money. It wasn't going to be any hard work. But all those things are totally wrong. But anyway, we did think it sounded fun, and we went back to school 2 weeks later, and just straight out of his college apartment, we started delivering warm cookies basically to the students at UT. And then from there, we just grew and grew, and we ended up having a physical location, and we expanded. In 2006, we opened another location in Dallas. And then from there, we started growing a little bit faster. Today, we have 36 locations across Texas. We got some in Atlanta. We're about to open in Nashville this month as well. And so I think up until that point, we were the everything to everyone for lots of years.
Yeah. Great. Jason, you want to tell your journey to that point as well?
I'll tell the story of TreeHouse as well, and maybe tie it in to why I think I have something helpful to say. My background is as a conservation biologist, so I wanted to work at the intersection of like human flourishing and ecological flourishing. And it turns out, if you do the research, the built environment is far and away the number one contributor. Buildings are the number one user of energy, the number two user of water, the number one producer of landfill waste. Most toxin exposure in all of our lifetimes will happen indoors, not outdoors. And it's like, holy cow, I don't need to be a field biologist. I need to be working on the built environment. So we started TreeHouse to be a healthy, sustainable alternative to conventional building and remodeling practices. We have 3 locations, Austin, Dallas, and Plano, and are actively expanding right now. But when we opened the doors, we were so sure that this was such a righteous and good business that we would have to hire security to keep people out of the store. And it turns out that's not at all what happened. I mean, we were just bleeding money. On a more sad note, within months of TreeHouse opening, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and it was just the worst year of my life. And several of the co-founders got let go, and it was just a tough road. And that was 6 years ago. And we fought and innovated and clawed and figured out ways to tell our stories. We became the number one selling location of Nest products in America, the first retail partner with Tesla for the Powerwall. I see a big-ass fan right there. Actually, we're the only retail company in America that sells that product. You can either buy it from us or from them, and we're cheaper. And so we just really did all this innovation and added in services, and then finally got to where this is really working. And I felt like Moses dragging the Israelites across the desert to get this thing done. And then we get right now, and so now we're having a lot of very serious investors approach the table and saying, this is the real deal. We're ready to take you guys to the moon, but you need a professional CEO. So I'll leave it at that for the rest.
Well, so Candy, I want to hear your perspective on, so we haven't dug quite into this moment with these guys yet, but from your perspective, can you just sort of define this moment we're talking about when people reach that sort of critical inflection point?
Absolutely, and it's interesting because I love listening to entrepreneur stories as they talk about making that transition out. And I have to commend Jason for saying it wasn't everything he thought it was going to be, and the fact that we have this myth. We think, oh, it's going to be all sunshines and roses and rainbows and whatever, and as soon as I create a business, then, if I build it, they will come. Yeah, that does not happen when you're an entrepreneur, and anyone that's been an entrepreneur can feel that pain. And I think, you really got to get in that mindset to say, when they come, then we build it. And so it's interesting because, I joke a little flippantly sometimes that for most entrepreneurs, they have this incredible gift they put out there, yet they don't know how to spell business, let alone really what it takes to operate and put the pieces in place. And so I think that's a lot of what you're hearing here is that what happens next once you say, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to jump in that space?
So one of the things, I think founders of companies often are certainly in these 2 cases, sort of the creative visionaries behind the business, right? The reason the business exists is because you had these really big ideas and you took this great leap to go pursue those ideas. And yet then you find yourself dealing with HR and dealing with finance and dealing with all these things that aren't actually your core strengths. And I want to talk a little bit about that struggle to sort of find the time to deal with your core strength and then making the leap to being able to sort of finally double down on them again when you can sort of outsource things. What was the moment when you sort of, Tiffany, let's start with you, had to sort of hand some of those things off, and how did you deal with that process?
Yeah, you're so right, because I think when you start a business, you don't realize how often you're going to be restarting a computer and hoping when you turn it back on, the printer works, because you've got no background in that, and that's the best thing you can think to do. So, for us, we decided to start outsourcing things as soon as we realized the things that we were the worst at and or the things that we hated the most. And so our first choice was HR. It was all the hiring. We weren't that great at it. We weren't that good at creating those HR policies. So we definitely handed that off first. And it is freeing, once you are able to hand off some of those things and you can start focusing more on the vision and getting back to what is really fun about it, which for us is the branding. It's growing the brand. It's making sure that this magical moment that you're trying to create for people can be created. And handing something off like HR or like IT, that was a huge one for us, can really help give you that freedom.
Jason, we were talking the other day, and you were talking a little bit about commercial real estate, and you had sort of an adventure in dealing with commercial real estate. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, actually, in the early days, an entrepreneurial CEO has to do everything. And so TreeHouse, we started in Austin, and we were ready to open 2 more stores. And if I looked around the room, there were no real estate people. And so it was on me to go negotiate our real estate deals for the next 2 locations. And so I did what all of us do. I Googled things, I watched YouTube videos, and I thought I was going to be like a hard-ass negotiator, and I was just going to go make a good deal for the company. And I think I did. I got some amazing rent concessions. I don't know if you guys work in real estate, but we got $75 a square foot of tenant improvement, which for a 35,000 square foot location was like millions of dollars the landlord was going to put into building out our stores. I thought I did so good. And I got back to the board, and I was like, here's the deal I made. And they were like, oh, but you forgot to negotiate the rent shouldn't start until 6 months after we're open. Like, you sort of like missed this little like fine point of like proper professional real estate negotiation. And it was like, they're like, golly, good job, Jason, but we were really gonna have to get a pro in here to like help out with stuff. And it's like, holy cow, guys. Because once you sort of get to a certain scale, they expect professionalism, and they expect, there's millions of dollars on the line in the case of TreeHouse. And so you get to a point where you have to bring in specialists. And that point happened really recently for TreeHouse, where it's like in early days, the CEO of an entrepreneur company has to do a B or B plus job in 17 different things. And to get big and serious and to go up against the Home Depots and the Lowe's of the world, you need people doing an A plus in every single job function. It's just not something people can do, but it's hard to hear because you feel such a personal, I'm sure you feel this way, connection to the brand and the mission and what you do. And it's like, you sort of think you need to do everything, but it's actually, and I'm sure you'll get to this, it's when the board sat me down, they're like, Jason, you're not doing real estate anymore. It was like, what, but I could do, I'm so smart, I work so hard, blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, oh, thank God, like I don't have to do it actually feels like so good to like, I'm never talking to another commercial real estate broker in my life if I can help it, but I thought I needed to do it, and I'm glad not to.
We just brought in somebody in-house for real estate, and so we've been in business for 19 years, and up until 17 years in, Leon and I were doing all of the leases, and we thought we were doing an okay job, and now when this new guy comes in and he'll look back through our old leases, he's like, do you realize that this clause is in here? Like, yeah, I didn't really read those. I just signed off. So.
Candy, can you talk about sort of do a thought experiment, which I think you do with some of your entrepreneurs that you work with, in trying to identify those things and trying to do, there's sort of a math you put people through to figure out, hey, how are you spending your time and how wise is what you're doing here?
Yeah, and I would say one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur is what I call that dance or that salsa in between where to invest, how to invest, and letting go of control at the same time. Because most entrepreneurs are like me, either in the space of being a recovering control freak or they're still really wound up as a control freak. And so they have a vision for how everything comes together, and what they don't realize is so many times they're the one that's getting in the way. And so it's interesting because you really got to get into kind of a two-prong equation, which one is what are the big rocks, the 3 big rocks or the priorities for where you want to go this year, the next 2 years, whatever it is. What's the outcome? Where do you want to go? What are you trying to have happen? And then breaking it down and say, so what are my strengths in this space and where could I possibly actually be hindering that process? And so for a lot of people, it's holding up that mirror to say, okay, we got to get really real right now to say, in this process, what am I doing or what could I possibly be doing that's actually causing havoc and whatever? And sometimes you got to have egg on the face and you got to be humble, right? I will tell you as an entrepreneur, one of the hardest things or the spaces to make that shift is when you're humble and you go, okay, maybe I'm not the person. Maybe I'm a B plus or even a C or a C minus player in that space.
Why are you being so mean?
Because you're right next to me. But I mean, it's that space of really getting honest with yourself. And I think for most entrepreneurs, that's the hardest part. The people that I work with, it's really saying, and so I love that, Tiff's like, we got to invest in HR first. One of the first things I tell entrepreneurs is, look, you need to be investing in your bookkeeper and your accountant. Because I'm going to tell you, as someone who was a mechanical engineer, accounting is backwards math. And I did my books the first year, and it cost me 3 times what it would cost me when I finally hired my bookkeeper. And she had a very direct way of saying, your books kind of suck. And I've got to really start all over and build that again. And so you've got to have that lever to say, I've got to invest to grow, and I got to let go of control.
As opposed to focusing on what you're actually good at.
Right.
and why you started the business.
Right, because they waste a lot of time. And so I do an exercise with people sometime that talks about how do you calculate the time you're wasting. So the question is, what's your time costing you? And I'm going to ask you, if I might, for just a second, to just think about all the activities you do in your week. And right now, I want you to identify, as an entrepreneur, the 2 or 3 things you're doing that you know you're not playing at your highest and best value. So for example, it might be your email, your social media, procrastinating and dinking around with things that are not in your wheelhouse. I want you to think honestly about how much time you're spending in that space. And then I want you to think about how much time per week, what's an hour of your time worth? So what could you bring in terms of business in an hour? And I want you to multiply those 2 things together. When I did that exercise the first time for myself, because I have to use my tools before I can teach them, I pretty much passed out on the floor, because conservatively it was $13,000 a week. And on a higher level, it was $25,000 plus I was wasting from one task that wasn't me playing at my highest and best level. That's the cost, and so you got to do the money equation for people.
And it's not just, like in Jason's example, it's not just that he's spending a bunch of time doing commercial real estate, but he's spending a bunch of time Googling around trying to figure out how to do commercial real estate.
Yeah, I mean, my board, I have a really good and helpful board with some really A players, and they had me do this exercise. They didn't have me translate it to dollars, but they sort of broke up like finance, real estate, legal. Number one, rate yourself. What do you think you're top 50% in the world, top 25% in the world, top 10% in the world, top 5% in the world, and then how many hours are you spending? And it turned out I was spending 75% of my time on things that my self-perception was like, I'm probably bottom 50% in the world. In the few areas like building science, ecology, product innovation, technology, where I think in my space I'm probably top decile, I was spending about 5% of my time. And it was the humble pie. It was like you having to admit you're not Superman, and you can't be A+ in everything and do everything at an A+ level. Was actually like, I'm laughing and joking, but that was like a really, really hard thing to admit to myself and to the board and to my friends and to my wife. It's an emotional thing to admit.
But isn't it amazing when you have that reality? Because it sucks. It absolutely sucks when you're like, holy crap, I'm spending 80% of my time on things that aren't me playing on my highest, best level. But when you have that reality and then you get to be a superhero in the space where you really can kick some butt, it's like a game changer. And so it's interesting because I tell people all the time, if you're not doing what you think you want to be doing in your business, show me your calendar. I guarantee 80% of your calendar is you dinking around on things that are not aligned to those 3 big rocks that are going to be needle movers, game changers, revenue generators for you. And if we were to blow up your calendar and reverse it, it's amazing. Because doesn't it feel great when you actually have that reality and you're like, holy crap, I am Wonder Woman. I just had to play in the right space.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've spent so many years doing things I know nothing about. And even recently, you were saying, I guess you were about Googling even how to do it. We were looking to acquire a company, and we were just in the early stages. And so we thought, well, I'll just write up the basic term sheet. And I'm spending 30 minutes just trying to figure out how can I get the margins to go over like this, like the legal documents look. And after 30 minutes Googling, I was like, I'm going to send this to the attorney. What am I doing? Why am I writing this? There's no reason. I'm not qualified to do this in any form or fashion.
You're sort of flipping the superhero analogy we're using here on its head. It's sort of, there's the myth of the superhero entrepreneur, which is, this idea that you can do everything. But in fact, you become a superhero when you realize you can't do everything and you allow yourself to focus on what you're actually a superhero at. That's cool. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the things you can do. It's not just, hey, let's go out and hire an accountant, but there are all these systems out there and tools out there and services out there that you can take advantage of that you don't have to figure out on your own, or you don't even necessarily have to bring somebody in-house to do. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of deal with trying to figure out what some of those services are that you can take advantage of? In effect, sort of hacks to help you get over these things quickly. Jason, you want to start?
I'll jump in. A lot of entrepreneurs drink the Elon Musk, Steve Jobs kind of Kool-Aid of like, we're going to build a closed platform where we develop everything and deploy it ourselves. And it was ridiculous because at TreeHouse we were, we thought we were innovative. I think we are innovative, but we decided to be innovative in everything. And my message to entrepreneurs is like, be innovative at your business. But things like office services or servers for all your data that you're getting about your customers, like we tried to like stand up our own like servers internally when there's like tons of like, it's so stupid. Everyone's laughing at me already. There are so many things that is people's core business. And so it turns into like a hack if you can grab things that already people have done, and so that you can innovate on your core business.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, when we do a lot of proprietary software for things that are, we need to have to control the business. But some of those things, example, scheduling software, we don't need to be building that. There are companies out there that do that, and we can tie into it, but we don't have to build that. Another tool that we use that's awesome is Asana project management software. We really can't even operate without it. We have this kind of informal saying that says, Asana down, party up, because it means when Asana's down, we're lost. We got nothing left to do but party. So utilizing those kind of tools that are already out there that somebody has built and has been a specialist in is key.
You said something to me the other day about how there was no such thing as a company like Tiff Streets. There was no like warm cookie delivery. So it was like, okay, you've got to create things that make it possible to provide the service you're providing because it's new, right? And that led you to try to invent all kinds of things that you later realized.
Yeah, we were inventing everything. I mean, we were inventing down to HR policies. And people are people from one company to the next. So your basic HR policies don't need to be invented by me. But up until, a few years ago, that's what we were doing. Myself and another person would go case by case. And when something would come in, we would sit down and come up with something from scratch. And then we realized over time that we could hire a true HR professional who just sort of knew these things and knew that there are standards across the board. And, we don't need to be inventing every single thing. And that's kind of actually hard over time because as you have an innovative business, you do think you need to invent everything, but you really only need to invent some of it and then just use what's out there for the rest.
Yeah, I mean, for us, anybody ever done a major home improvement project in here or built a house? Like, it's a disaster, right? I mean, it's just like, it would be like a wedding planner who routinely ruined wedding days. I mean, it's just like, and it's okay. And so we were gonna manage this experience, and we just like, we're gonna have this high touch, white glove, customer service journey experience thing, and like, nobody knows how to handle our customers like we do, and we have to really manage the relationship carefully, so we're gonna have to do it all proprietary, and what we do is special and different, and we spend all this money doing customer relationship management stuff. It's like, Salesforce. Like, it just works like way better, and that's not a plug for Salesforce. But like, somebody has already done that, and you're not as special as you think you are, and it allowed us to get back to the actual home improvement instead of building customer relationship management software for home improvement. Lots of stress off, and it works.
And I'm gonna bring the other side of that equation because I actually want to challenge both of you, if I might, for a minute, because there is the space of I can't do it all myself. There's all this stuff that's available to me, and then there's this great thing that happens, which is analysis paralysis or app overload. And so where entrepreneurs get stuck next, and I would love to hear a little bit about from you guys how you overcame that, because you go from that space of okay, maybe I can't do it all myself, so you finally let that go. And then you start researching all the different things that are available to you. Well, maybe I should do Salesforce, or maybe I should do this CRM, or maybe I should use this, or maybe I should use that, or maybe I should have this calendaring system. And wait, maybe it's this one, but maybe it's this one. But last I checked, there's a new one on the market now, and now I want this one. And it's like the shiny squirrel. Oh my gosh, there's another app, and I got to be on the front and cutting edge of what's out there. And so how do you manage that? Because it's one of the biggest challenges I work with entrepreneurs is analysis paralysis. So I get those people that have to research everything. And then it's finally like, okay, just make a decision and we will measure and we will see where you can go. Or it's the app overload. And I'd rather go down the rabbit holes and check out the cat video because to research one more thing or to have the next shiny whatever shuts me down. So I'm curious how you guys dealt with that.
Well, I think, I have the personality, and so does Leon, that, we saw one house and we bought it. We don't do a lot of looking around. So for us, we always say any decision, even the wrong one, is better than making no decision at all. So sometimes we're a little bit more about finding one thing, it looks cool, trying it, and going with it. And then after, give it a real chance. But if it doesn't work, you can scrap it and try something different. So for us, we just kind of make decisions really quickly, which also is key because my job at this point is pretty much 98% just making decisions and then 2% doing other stuff.
I'm sorry, you said a phrase, which as a boy from East Texas, I can't get out of my head, which is shiny squirrel. So if you haven't trademarked that, please do something with it because I can't stop thinking about shiny squirrels now. but the biggest example of what you're talking about in my company was we didn't have tight central control over communications platforms, and so the design team loved Slack, and the technology team loved Asana, and the operating business used Google Drive. And so me as the CEO, these are supposed to be like efficiency, productivity tools, and what it felt like to me is like I have 15 inboxes, and I can't keep up with anything. And so perhaps getting clear about which productivity tools are going to be more productive would certainly be helpful.
And I would just echo on what Tiffany said. It's that being able to execute decisions quickly and knowing that you always can make a different decision, but it's that opportunity to say any decision is better than no decision. And we have to have something that we can hang our hat on and build things around that. Give it 90 days, give it 6 months, whatever. Measure it, test it, and then say, okay, is it working or not? And as a CEO to say, okay, there's just too many moving parts and pieces. How do we streamline that down, and how do we put the puzzle together the right way?
So this is great. I want to make sure we have time for some questions. I know we have a few people in the audience here who work a lot with entrepreneurs in these kinds of scenarios and might have some questions as well.
Hi, how are you? Listening. How did you develop the listening skill? Because you are so focused in your business, you two. How you listen to people? How you develop the skill listening? You know.
I developed a personal rule, and it's interesting. I've never actually shared it out loud, but my rule in a meeting for myself is speak last, because there's an effect that when the CEO says something in a meeting, it can sort of kill. People are like, I better not say my thought. And so I try to sort of, once I've laid out an agenda, to speak last. Because once the CEO has spoken, it's sort of like, well, now we know the program, we better get on board. And I have found that to be a super helpful kind of principle.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That's a really good thought. As I think you're right, because probably once I voice my opinion, maybe people are nervous to say theirs. So that's a really good thought. For me, I always think that other people have a lot of value to say. So I don't think it's hard to think that you need to listen to what they have to say, especially in our case with a customer-facing retail brand. The people that are in the field, they know more about it than I do right now in terms of if we're making a decision about something, I don't want to be making a decision up in the clouds. It needs to relate to what they're doing day in and day out, and they're in the store every single day, and I'm not. So they've got something valuable to say.
Yeah, and I would just add 2 pieces to that. One is release assumptions. So don't walk into a meeting thinking you know how it's going to turn out. So many times we say, oh, they're not going to sign with us anyway, or oh, they're not going to do this. And your energy and your presence reflect whatever assumption you're playing in your head. So go in with an open mind to say, this is going to go where it's going to go, which is the second point, which is unattach yourself to the outcome. So when you emotionally unattach to, it's got to end up this way, you end up leaving a space for it to go exactly where it needs to go, and you walk in saying, I trust that if I show up and I present a space for other people, they're going to feel like they can contribute, and wherever we arrive is going to be far better than what I could have put in my mind, because otherwise you walk in with an agenda and people feel that.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. Are there things that you wish you had done sooner? Like handed off per se, or
I think what she said about accounting. Yeah, we should have done that sooner. Between the two of us, we created an accounting system that made no sense. And when we finally did, it was really our board that pushed us. You've got to get this under control. The deposits that are coming in aren't really being properly recorded. And when we did clean it up, we had $20,000 just missing, just gone. It's something that we thought we had that we didn't have. Yeah, I think you can get professionals that are specialists in things. If you're really not a specialist in something, maybe you can do that a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a clear answer because I'm still processing this myself. My transition from CEO to president of my company is fairly recent. There's a sense that in the early days, you kind of do have to do it. There's no world in which a startup gets to hire a slate of like A-player professionals. Like we only hire A-teamers. I've heard companies say it's like it can't be true. And so I don't know that there's another way, which is why this is so hard, because you had to try to do your best, and then having done your best to realize it wasn't enough, it is emotionally challenging. What I would say as a different kind of answer is like to any CEOs and entrepreneurs out there, don't have an ego about it. Like the thing is like you're going to make the handoffs and don't have an ego about it. So.
We can do one rapid fire question. Rapid fire.
Okay, in financial growth, did you decide to bring somebody in as a partner and take on someone else's financial growth, or did you get a loan? How did you make the decision to grow financially, and what did you do?
Yeah, I'll try to answer quickly. Originally, we got some loans, but that was when they were giving out loans. This was a long, long time ago. When we started to grow past that, it was in 2008. They were no longer giving loans, not even an equipment loan backed by the exact equipment they were loaning you. They wouldn't even give you that. And so we lucked into an angel investor at that time. And so since that time, we've actually raised $50 million over the course of several years. But
Congrats.
It's a similar kind of deal. I mean, we're trying to like take on Home Depot and Lowe's, frankly. And it's sort of like starting an overnight delivery business by airplane. You need more than one airplane. Like that's a big, so the amount of money necessary and the amount of risk, like loans were not an option for us. We had to go straight to the angel and venture community. And yeah, we've had to raise a lot of money to do what we do. So.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you everybody for coming.